Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with a video I'm very excited to make and to talk about. Today we're going to be ranking and talking about candidates for each of the 10 college football head coaching vacancies. That's right, we're going to go through every single one of them, rank them, and we're going to talk about some potential candidates. But before we get into that, it's at this point I'm going to ask you to like the video, subscribe, and comment. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by talking a little bit more in depth about what we're going to be doing in this video. So effectively, the way this video is going to work is as I rank them, we're going to start with a ranking and why, and talking a little bit about why I have them ranked, where I have them ranked. We're then going to move on to the candidates for those people. So it's going to go ranking and then sort of the guys that I think will end up being in that conversation for that job or have already been linked to that job. So that's the way that it's going to do. Okay. As far as for a little explanation of how I'm going to rank these teams, okay, I'm ranking them somewhat objectively, but not really. I'm not trying to sit down here and make an argument about which is the best job, but the reality of the situation, at least for me, is a lot of jobs that people think are good jobs or better jobs than other jobs are just flat out and straight up not better jobs than other jobs. Okay, they're just not. Okay, period. End of discussion. And we're going to get into the reason why I have a lot of teams ranked where they're ranked. But for now, it's effectively, if I was interviewing for this job or all 10 of these jobs and had been offered all 10 of these jobs, how would I rank them? Okay, so it ultimately just comes down to how much I would want the job if I was a head coaching candidate that could possibly interview for any of these things, all right? So that's the way that this is going to work. So now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it by starting with the number 10 job of the currently opened head coaching positions. And that number 10 job is in fact the UAB job, the University of Alabama in Birmingham. The reality of this situation is this is not an enviable job at even the Division I level. There are probably several FCS, hell, maybe even like a dozen FCS jobs I would rather have than this job, and a handful of Division II jobs I would rather have than this one, okay? Extraordinarily limited recruiting base in Alabama itself, especially given that there are two much bigger schools as well. So you're effectively fighting for scraps of scraps, given that you have to compete with both Alabama and, in fact, Auburn. So not great there. NIL is not anything to look at, really. It's not like a power basis that this program has. All in all, this is just not an enviable position to be in. Okay, now somebody with a bigger ego than me who thinks that they'll be able to come in and do really, really well, and maybe they will end up getting this job, or maybe they won't. I don't know. But actually, I just remembered Troy is in Alabama too. So you're fighting for scraps of scraps of scraps, because Troy is probably a bigger and better program. They're 5-2, I think, this year, if I'm not mistaken. Shout out to Troy. But yeah. Anyway, getting into the candidates that I have for this job. Bill Clark, who is the only coach that I am aware of that ever had any real sort of success at UAB. This is someone that the fan base has sort of been clamoring at for to bring him back into the fold. Neil Brown, the former West Virginia head coach and the former, I believe he was at Temple before that. I might be wrong about that. I'm not sure. But he also is a name that has been floated around as potentially being a interesting fit, as well as Tyson Helton from Western Kentucky. However, I'm going to be honest with you, that seems like a lateral move to me. Like, Bill Clark and Neil Brown are unemployed, so there's no such thing as a lateral move. Or at least I think Neil Brown's unemployed. He might not be. He might be on some coaching staff somewhere. I didn't check. But he isn't a head coach. So that is an upgrade. So yeah, those are the candidates. I'm not going to make a prediction about who's going to get this job. Really any of the jobs in this video. It's not particularly what I do or what I'm good at. I just think it's kind of interesting to talk about stuff like this. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about my number 9 job, which might surprise some people. I have Arkansas ranked at number 9. This is not a job that I would want, just period, okay? Arkansas, as a program, does not understand who they are. They're not the biggest case of not understanding who they are, okay? And we'll get to that, later on in this video. But Arkansas does not understand who they are, which is they are a team that's going to have to fight like hell to get to 8 wins every year. That's what they are, okay? I think that there is a pretty delusional section of specifically the SEC, because there are a lot of delusional programs in the SEC that thinks that they should be winning national titles every year or competing for national titles every year, when pretty much all of them except Alabama and Georgia in its most recent run with Kirby Smart have basically never done on a consistent scale. I mean, Florida had a quality run with Urban Meyer, but that was only like 5 years. And yeah, Steve Spurrier before that, he was a good coach. He won 1 national title and didn't really get close to another one. All right, so no, I don't want to hear that. But yeah, there are a lot of schools that just don't understand who they are in the SEC. It's not an SEC specific problem, but it is more pervasive in the SEC than it is in a lot of other conferences, at least in my opinion. Just isn't a good job. Now, they've got a better NIL situation than a lot of teams ahead of them on this list, but I don't care. You're not going to recruit at a very high level in Arkansas. Like, you're not going to be cranking out top 10 classes unless you're the best recruiter in the history of college football. It's just not, there's nothing compelling about this job to me, so that's why it's ranked number 9. As far as the top candidates go, these are the guys that I would be interested in if I was hiring for the position for Arkansas. My top candidate would probably be Eric Morris, the head coach for North Texas. Put up a ton of points at North Texas. Competing, they've got a real shot at 11-1 in the regular season, potentially meeting up with USF in a conference championship game again. But maybe they do that, maybe they don't. Memphis is still tough, but Memphis already has 1 loss, and they're probably going to lose to USF this week. So it might just be North Texas again, but whatever. Brian Hartline would also then be the next coach on this list that I would be interested for Arkansas. Brian Hartline, the current offensive coordinator for Ohio State. There's just 2 problems. You're going to have to wait for him, and if you wait for him, because of them getting rid of the second transfer portal window, which was fucking stupid. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire goddamn life. Like literally, get rid of the first one. Don't get rid of the second one. That's after the season's over for everybody. Get rid of the first one. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. You're effectively just guaranteeing, if you're a playoff team, that you retain all of your coaches, as opposed to letting them have opportunities at schools like this. Because if they don't do that, they're getting fucked in the ass by not being able to go out and recruit. But I don't need to rehash that. Nevertheless, Brian Hartline would be somebody, if you could pull him away from Ohio State, he would be somebody that I would be willing to make a borderline absurd offer to make your head coach. Rhett Lashlee at SMU. Again, I think SMU is a way better job than Arkansas, but Arkansas can probably pay him more money than SMU. So he might be looking at that. Two other candidates here, Josh Summerall from Tulane and Gus Malzahn from Florida State. I only threw Gus Malzahn in there because Dan Mulling said he wasn't going to go to Arkansas, and he said, nah, you guys should hire Gus Malzahn, though. And you know, we're going to talk about Auburn at the end of this video, but what the fuck were they doing firing him? Craziest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Anyway, that's Arkansas. Those are my candidates. Again, not making predictions, but yeah. I'm not really sure they could pull any of these guys, I'm being honest with you. But these are just the top 5 that I would go after. Number 8 on my list of current head coaching vacancies is Kent State. And yeah, that's probably going to piss some people off. I don't care. I would rather be the head coach at Kent State than I would at Arkansas. And largely it comes down to I don't want to deal with people who don't understand their level of program. Like, Kent State knows who they are. Legitimately. They know who they are. They're arguably the worst football program at the Division I level. Okay? They're real bad. All right? The thing is, A, they're in the MAC. Okay? So if you can do some recruiting and get some people to commit to you, you can take over that conference pretty damn quickly. All right? B, it doesn't take a whole lot to win the goddamn MAC. You don't need to get 5-star recruits to win the MAC. You just need to get maybe some rejects from some middling Power 5 schools, get them, or guys that are buried in the depth chart, convince them to come in here, all that kind of stuff. Kent State does have a large alumni base, surprisingly, when I was doing my research for this video. So NIL isn't great, but if you could put it in a situation, it probably would have a chance to be one of the better ones within the MAC itself. Okay? So, yeah, I think it'd also be a prime spot to potentially poach some players from the FCS as well. There's some stuff that you can do to make this a pretty reasonable job. And if you win at Kent State, you can then jump to basically anywhere. Or you can stay at Kent State and be a king. That's what I'd do. Fuck ambition. I don't have any ambition. That's why I'm a 27-year-old who works at a convenience store and doesn't care about anything. Anyway, that's Kent State here. My top candidates for Kent State. It's going to be number 1, Vince Kurz, I think is how you say it, or Kres rather. Vince Kres, the Toledo defensive coordinator. I think that would be a interesting spot for him. Toledo's been a program with Jason Candle there. Like, they've done a pretty good job since Matt Campbell left. They've won some MAC championships. They've done a pretty good job. They did a pretty good job down there in Toledo. And Kres is a solid defensive coordinator. So he'd be somebody that I'd be interested in give up a phone call there. Jeff Dart, the Mountain Union head coach. Mountain Union's been successful for forever. They've had their coaches rise up the ranks as well. That would be a guy who'd give a call. But the real interesting one here, the wild card, would be Tony Annese out of Ferris State, the head coach out of Ferris State. Now, I don't know about how many of you are keeping up on D2 ball, but Ferris State's won 3 out of the last 4 national championships at the Division II level. Okay? He seems like a prime candidate to jump to a MAC school after this year. We saw that with Brian Kelly when he won 3 out of 4 at Grand Valley State, also in the state of Michigan, so shout out to them. He then jumped to Central Michigan and did a pretty good job at Central Michigan. And then he made a jump, and then he made a jump, and then now he's probably going to get fired from LSU this year, but it's whatever. Tony Annese would be the guy that I would probably be the most excited about if I was a Kent State fan for some reason. But yeah, he would be the dude that I would be very interested in calling. All three of these guys, I think he would have a pretty decent chance of being able to get. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. The number 7 job opening for me is gonna be Florida, which again, I think might piss some people off. But yeah, no, this would be a very tough sell for me to come and coach at Florida, because fundamentally speaking, this is the program of out of all the college football programs that I am aware of. They have the second worst problem of not knowing who they are. Okay? You are right now not a top probably 8 job in the SEC. Okay? You're just not. Okay? The reality of the situation is Florida State's probably going to be open. If they get going, you're the 3rd program in Florida. Miami's got a bigger base. They're a stronger brand nationally. Florida State's got a bigger base. They're a stronger brand nationally. USF is kicking ass. UCF is actually doing pretty solid as well. So when you're fighting with that many people in the same area for the same recruits, along with the fact that Florida just, it gets poached from everywhere in the country, that's tough, okay? They probably have the best or second best NIL out of anybody, okay? So I will give them that. They have gotten better from a facility standpoint, from a willingness to hire analysts and do the things that modern college football programs do. That kind of started with Billy Napier, but dog, this is not a program that I see being consistently getting the double-digit wins ever, in the way that modern football is formulated. Okay, because you're going to play Georgia every year. You're going to play one of Miami or Florida State every year, probably, in your non-conference games. And, boy, yeah, I don't get it, man. I don't see the vision that a lot of people have with making Florida national championship contenders. Because, again, outside of that, Tim Tebow run, that 5-year stretch with Urban Meyer. And yes, Steve Spurrier was a very good coach. I'm not going to deny that. He won a national championship. I'm not denying that. Okay, Lloyd Carr won a national championship at Michigan as well. Did he elevate that program to something it had never been before? Or did he just have one really good team and then was just a solid coach after that? Okay, because the answer is Lloyd Carr had one really good team and then was a solid coach after that. And that's kind of the way I feel about Steve Spurrier as well, especially given how down the SEC was when he was really dominating it. Okay? So, yeah, I don't see the vision in terms of being able to turn this into a high-quality program. I don't like that the fan base and the administration just fundamentally doesn't accept who they are. Okay? Because they should never have fired Dan Mullen. That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody do. Maybe. Okay? I've heard dumber things that people have done, but we don't need to get into all of that. It's one of the stupidest moves I've ever seen a college football team make in terms of firing coaches. Genuinely a horrible decision. Just a bad, awful, god-awful decision to fire Dan Mullen. It never should have happened. Nevertheless, top candidates here. The two that I would try to get and that I think are semi-realistic are Elijah Drinkwitz from Missouri and Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. Okay. Now, Lane Kiffin has kind of been coy about whether or not he'd go to Florida. I think he's doing that to get paid at Ole Miss. And to be honest with you, Ole Miss and Florida are effectively the same job, except Ole Miss understands who they are and Florida doesn't. I would much rather be the head coach at Ole Miss than at Florida, me personally. So, yeah, that one's interesting, I suppose. But Drinkwitz would really be the number one guy because I think he would have a chance to kind of take Florida and fill the role that he that he has created for himself at Missouri. Except, Florida does have more pull as a brand. It's not, an insane difference, but Florida does have more pull as a brand. They do have better NIL. They've got more donors. They're closer at home to a lot of recruits than Missouri is. Okay, so they'd be able to recruit better, and they'd be able to do some interesting things, in terms of like off the field and the administrative stuff as well. But on the field, Drinkwitz has shown the ability to have consistent and very good offenses. And this year, he's shown the ability to have very good defenses as well, just kind of in general. Drinkwitz has done a fantastic job at Missouri, and I think he's somebody that needs to get talked about more for like bigger, quote-unquote, bigger jobs. But I don't really see either of them leaving because Drinkwitz has got it made at Missouri. Lane Kiffin is a god amongst men in Ole Miss, so I don't really see him leaving either, especially if they pay him, 11, 12, 13 million dollars like it's being talked about with that contract extension. All right. John Summerall from Tulane is the next guy up. Alex Golesh from USF is another guy that would be interesting. And then simply so I don't have to fucking listen to him on Big Noon Kickoff, I would say you throw Urban Meyer like $20 million a year, and you just say, hey, why don't you come back? You can come back. It'd be a good time. Why don't you come back? Why don't you come back? Come back down to Florida. Come back down to Orlando. We'll take care of you. We'll give you $20 million a year. We'll make you the highest paid coach in college football. It'll be great. That's what I'd do. That'd be one of the first things I did. Now, I don't know if he wants to come back to coaching. I have no idea. But I also just don't want to fucking listen to him on Big Noon Kickoff either. The number 6 job that I would be interested in is, in fact, Colorado State. Yes, I know, controversial. I would rather be the head coach of Colorado State than I would be Florida or Arkansas or Kent State or UAB. Throw them in there too. But as far as Colorado State goes, this is an interesting position because they're going to become part of the Pac-12 next year. Now, it's only an 8-team Pac-12, I believe. However, I also believe that makes the conference champion of the Pac-12 eligible for an automatic bid to the playoffs. Okay? And that's largely the reason why I have Colorado State at 6. Okay? But also, I don't think I'd put them any lower. I think I'd honestly rather, even outside of that, even if it's not the case, even if you need 10 teams, the Pac-12 is probably going to add another 2 teams at some point. But even if they don't do that, I think it would, in fact, be very interesting to be the head coach of Colorado State. Because your big rival is Colorado. You don't fucking play every year. Because Colorado's in the Big 12. So, yeah, you could do that once in a blue moon. Maybe you win one. Now you're the god of the campus. So, yeah, be a good time. As far as the top candidates go for this job, Tony Alford, the Michigan running back coach, who I would not want to see leave at all. Okay, but the reality of the situation, Michigan probably isn't making the playoffs, so he's probably going to have the opportunity to interview for this job. I believe he's a Colorado State alum. Or he has ties to Colorado State. He's somebody that's been very sort of talked about, linked to this job, which I'm not happy about as a Michigan fan. But honestly, he'd probably be he'd probably be the guy that I would go after, just based off of the type of guy that you could get. He'd be one of the guys I'd go after. All right, Brent Vigen. It might be Vigen. I don't know. The Montana State head coach. He's done a very, very good job at Montana State. I'd be interested in bringing him in if I was Colorado State as well. And then Jay Hill. I believe we've already mentioned him, the BYU defensive coordinator, but he's a name that's going to come up several times for job openings this offseason, really at every level, but specifically for this kind of group of five sort of, mid-tier group of five level that Colorado State sort of inhabits. I believe he'll be getting a lot of looks in that area, specifically in the second wave, I think. In the second wave of the head coaching carousel, he's going to get a lot of looks there. Number 5 on the list here, we're starting to get into the jobs that I would quantify as being like actual good jobs to have. And that's UCLA. UCLA is a very, very interesting spot for you to be a head coach at, okay? Because UCLA has kind of, well, in the far past, in like the 70s, 60s, and 70s, they were a very consistent program. Outside of that, not really, but they've always had the ability to be a good program, okay? That's kind of why I really liked Chip Kelly being their head coach, but they were kind of running him out of the building for, again, no reason, because they don't understand who they are, which isn't great, okay? But I think this past hiring cycle, I think they've finally started to understand who they are, but that's just me, okay? UCLA is an interesting job because they would hypothetically have the ability to compete with a lot of local California and Southern California guys, more so than a lot of programs that come in and poach guys like that. They would also have the ability to pull some potentially Polynesian sort of recruits, which is a fucking big recruiting base that nobody talks about, but that's a big recruiting base here. There were several guys that I was considering for talking about who I thought the potential openings would be. But realistically speaking, it's just one dude. It's Tim Skipper. It's the guy who's already here and winning. Like, it's Tim Skipper. That's it. That's the list, okay? I could talk about the Hawaii head coach. I could talk about some other guys that I think would be interesting. But, what Tim Skipper has done these past 3 weeks has been nothing short of miraculous. Okay, and if he was the head coach the whole year, they'd probably have a very good chance of making a bowl game. So, yeah, him. Tim Skipper, that's it. That's the list. He's going to be who I think he's earned the right to be the UCLA head coach. My number 4 job is, in fact, Oklahoma State. And this is a very, very interesting job to me because while it doesn't have the best NIL situation, I think it's okay. They do have a relatively long and sustained history of success under Mike Gundy, and Mike Gundy was there for like 2 decades and a half. Like, he was there for like, I think 23 years or some shit like that. So they're pretty patient. He had bad years. He had years where he missed bowl games, and he had years where they were competing for, and I think winning a couple of times, Big 12 titles. So Oklahoma State is definitively a program that understands who they are. And that's inherently more attractive to me as an individual than a program like in Arkansas or Florida that just doesn't understand who they are, okay? Also, to go along with this, you're probably going to start again playing Oklahoma every year. All right, and that's an annual beatdown, but it is what it is. Outside of that, the Big 12 does not have a program that I'm all that concerned about in the near future. Texas A&M, I think in the long run, might be able to instigate themselves as a national sort of contender every year to be able to win playoff games and advance into the playoffs. I think that would be I think that's a significant possibility. But outside of that, BYU, very consistent, very good program, not a great program. Utah, very consistent, very good, not a great program. Everybody else. Arizona State's been very consistent, not a great program. You can compete with those types of teams relatively instantly at a place like Oklahoma State that has the success. They have an alumni base. They have, history that you can go back and look at and say, hey, listen, we were really, really, really good in a lot of these years. And you can do things with that. And fundamentally, they understand who they are. That's just a very compelling job for me. As far as the top candidates go, once again, I'm mentioning a couple of the same guys here because that's kind of the trend here. I have top candidates, okay? Eric Morris out of North Texas would be a beautiful fit for this program. I think he kind of knows the area, northern Texas, basically the Great Plains anyway. I think that would be a very, very good culture fit. I think he's a very good offensive mind as well. He's effectively turned around North Texas instantly. So that's really impressive as well. I really like Eric Morris. Again, Brian Hartline, I'm not sure he'd be all that interested in Ohio State. I think he'd be more interested in, something like Arkansas, where I mentioned him as, or spoilers, my number one team. He would be my number one candidate for my number one team. Okay. But a very interesting, I'd be very interested, rather, in having him come down to Stillwater. Jeff Traylor at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Again, same sort of thing, where he's used to competing for that second tier of athletes in Texas, because the top ones are not going to Oklahoma State or to Texas, San Antonio. But he's done a very good job at the University of Texas, San Antonio. They had that one special year where they had Zaire Franklin at wide receiver and the corner whose name I can't remember, who was very, very good and got drafted in the NFL. It was not Zion McCollum. He plays for the Seahawks. I'm blanking on his name. I can't remember. But he might get traded this year too, because he had that great rookie year, and it's just been bad the past 2 years after that. But it is what it is. Colin Klein, the Texas A&M head coach, or not head coach, offensive coordinator, is also someone I would be very, very, very interested in. But again, I don't think Texas A&M, or I think Texas A&M is going to make the playoffs, so I don't particularly see that as an option this year. Okay. And then finally, Zach Robinson, the Falcons offensive coordinator, is somebody that does have a lot of ties to Oklahoma State. This is somebody that they've mentioned several times, or several local people have brought his name up to be like, oh, this is somebody they should go after. But I see that as a tremendous long shot. Being a position coach in the NFL 9 times out of 10 is a better job than being a head coach in college football. It's just the reality situation, especially if you're like a football guy and you don't give a shit about anything else. You're going to be in the NFL, not in college. Next job here is, in fact, Penn State. And I've got Penn State ranked number 3. It is the, quote unquote, biggest job currently on the list. Bigger than Auburn. You can debate that it's bigger than Florida. I would say that it is. I think it's the biggest job opening currently. Okay, we're going to talk about some job openings that could potentially be bigger than Penn State after we do number 2 and number 1. But we can get to that eventually. I like this job. I think the reality of the situation is you're the big guy in your state. Your state has a lot of people in it. Your state's got some good prospects. It's a national brand, okay? People know what Penn State is. They know who that program is. It's competed for national titles in the past. It's been relatively consistent under James Franklin for however long he's been there. And the NIL is very good. It has a reputation for being able to develop players and put them in the NFL. A lot of very, very good and very superstar type of players in the NFL went to Penn State, and a lot of first round picks and a lot of drafted players as well. There's a lot to like about this job, but what's ultimately holding it back is it is without question, best case scenario, the 4th biggest brand in its conference. Okay. USC is a bigger brand. Michigan is a bigger brand. Ohio State is a bigger brand. You can argue a couple of other schools are also bigger or comparable brands, okay? Now, Oregon's a better job than Penn State, but it's not a bigger brand than Penn State, okay? That's a differentiating thing, okay? Washington is a big brand. I don't think it's bigger than Penn State, but you can make an argument, okay? You can make an argument for Oregon, although I would disagree with you pretty vehemently. Indiana in basketball, or because of basketball, is also a pretty big brand as well. But if you're not in the top three in your conference, which under no circumstances is Penn State in the top three, that is a limiting factor, okay? Not necessarily at NIL, not necessarily anything, but in terms of your ability to actually compete on a national scale, yes, that matters, and it matters quite a bit, in my opinion. So Penn State is ranked as the third best job opening currently, at least how I would rank them, in my opinion, so to speak. I think it's a very, very good job. I think you have a lot of resources. I think you have the most resources of any job currently alive, at least, or that hasn't been fired yet. Yes, more than Florida. I don't know if that's a controversial statement or not, but Penn State has more resources and more ability to be good consistently than Florida does. But it's a very, very good job, and I would be interested in doing it. But the problems, again, are it's not a big brand. It is going to struggle getting a lot of the bigger recruits to it because it's in the Midwest and it's not Ohio State. It is a bit of a negative, okay? I think the home field advantage is also extraordinarily overplayed, but that has nothing to do with anything. Anyway, moving on to the candidates here. My top candidates, Manny Diaz at Duke would be very, very interesting. It's the most realistic option, in my opinion. I wouldn't feel great about it, but I think you could consistently get to that 9-10 win, occasionally 11 win sort of season that James Franklin had been able to do relatively consistently at Penn State. I think you'll be able to return to that with Manny Diaz. The defenses will always be good, at least competent. Offense will be hit or miss, depending upon the offensive coordinator and the ability to recruit. Elijah Drinkwitz, who I also mentioned for previous jobs as well, he would be the guy that I would be like, oh, okay, Penn State's going to be dangerous now. All right. Do I think Missouri is a better job than Penn State? No, I don't. I don't think they're the same level of job either. I think Penn State is a better job than Missouri because Missouri is like the 10th biggest brand and has like the 12th best NIL of any school in the South, okay? And what Drinkwitz has been able to do at Missouri is nothing short of outstanding. He's a fantastic coach who is doing a lot with a pretty limiting set of circumstances at Missouri. And I think he would work wonders at Penn State. He would be my number one candidate for Penn State. I think it would be a great hire if they could manage to pull him away from Missouri, which I don't know if they would be able to do that or not. Clark Leah from Vandy would be another very good to great. I guess I don't think it would be as good as Drinkwitz, but I think it'd be a very good sort of situation there. I do think he's a very good coach because he's turned Vandy into a program that it hasn't been before, which is a legitimate top 25 program consistently. You know, James Franklin did a pretty good job at Vanderbilt, but a lot of that was they got some very favorable scheduling. But, you know, still winning 8 games at Vanderbilt consistently is kind of hard to do. And then the last of my real candidates that I would think would be good hires would be Matt Campbell from Iowa State. I don't think Matt Campbell's going anywhere. I think he's going to coach at Iowa State until they fire him. I think he's the new Pac or Big 12 version of James Gundy for Oklahoma State. I think this is a guy that's just going to be at Iowa State for forever. And I really like Matt Campbell. I think he'd do a good to great job at Penn State because Iowa State does not have any resources, just in general. They just don't. And he would have a lot of resources and the ability to do a lot of things at Penn State. And what I know about Matt Campbell, more than I know it about basically any of these coaches, I know Matt Campbell's teams are going to be disciplined, and I know he knows how to develop talent. He's been very, very consistent, whether that's at Toledo or now at Iowa State for the past decade. He's been very, very consistent. He's had players go in the first round. He's had players go very, very high. He knows how to develop talent. And if you can get high 4, 5-star kind of guys and you can develop them, that is a recipe for a whole lot of success. And then finally, my last sort of candidate here, which I do not view as very realistic, this would be an emergency hire, would be Matt Rule out of Nebraska. This would be a Brady Hoke. Everybody else said no. Nobody's interested. We have to hire somebody. Let's go get Matt Rule. That would be the emergency candidate hire, because I don't particularly think Matt Rule is doing a great job at Nebraska. But he's not doing a bad job at Nebraska either. I think he's okay. I just think Nebraska is kind of a limiting situation as well. But that's just me. My number 2 job is probably the most surprising out of this entire list, and that's Oregon State, okay? And it's not because of anything to do with the actual football program, so to speak, okay? The reality of the situation for Oregon State is it is a limiting sort of deal, okay? But we have to stop thinking about Oregon State as a Power 5 team. The Power 5 doesn't exist. It's the Power 4. And with those 6, 7 teams joining the Pac-12 next year, so it'll be the Pac-8, I believe, even though they won't call it that. It'll be the Pac-12 still for some stupid fucking reason. I believe they are probably the most appealing job within that new Pac-12, okay? And the reality of the situation is, if you win the Pac-12, you will be eligible for an automatic bid in the playoff if you are one of the 5 highest-ranked conference champions. I believe you have to have 8 teams to be eligible for that. I believe that's the rule. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I believe that's the rule. And Oregon State has the ability as a program to be consistent. We saw that with Jonathan Smith. Now, Jonathan Smith's failing miserably at Michigan State and may be on his way out, but he was very good at Oregon State, and if he is on his way out, maybe we would see a reunion here, but we'll get to candidates in a minute. I like this job for a few reasons, okay? Number one, the Big Ten does not have any mandatory out-of-conference rule, meaning you won't have to play Oregon every year. So that's one automatic loss taken off the schedule, okay? There are only 8 other teams in your conference, which means you can only possibly have 7 conference games. You've got 5 other games to fill. So you can fill those with other group of 5 teams or bad FCS teams, okay? So those could be 5 relatively winnable games right off the bat with a weaker conference, all right? Your ability to come in and operate like what has been a Power 5 program with the resources of a Power 5 program in a group of 5 setting. Washington State could also hypothetically do that as well, but I think Oregon State has a little bit better of a opportunity to excel at doing that. Because the reality is that they're probably the top dog in the conference if they're coached well. And that is very appealing to me, okay? Not only that, but Oregon State is also a program that kind of understands who they are. They're not going to fire you for going 8-4 one year. They're not going to fire you for having one bad year. And if you win 9-10 games, you are a king on the campus. Like, you are the biggest thing that's ever happened at Oregon State. So this is a very appealing job to me. It, to me, is high reward and relatively low risk. All right? So that's why I've got it ranked so high. As far as the candidates go here, I've got 5 people, but before we actually get into them, they're on the screen, you can look at them. But before we actually get into them, I do want to talk about the possibility of Jonathan Smith returning, because I think that would he would be my probably number one candidate for Oregon State if he ends up getting fired from Michigan State. Which after this weekend, if Michigan wins in like a dominant fashion, might happen. They might fire him. I think that's a very real possibility, but I also could be wrong. I believe that would be a very good thing to happen, would be for Jonathan Smith to go back to Oregon State, because I think he, for whatever reason, he just had the mojo at Oregon State. He put together 2 really, really good years at a program that you can make the argument has been arguably the worst program in the FCS level. Like, really bad, okay? So, yeah, they've been not great. And Jonathan Smith was the first guy that kind of, did a good job there. As far as my actual candidates here, I have 2 guys, and then I've got 3 other guys that I'd like them, but I wouldn't be excited, okay? Dan Mullen would be my number 1 guy of the coaches currently available. He's currently at UNLV, but he did a very good job at Florida and got fired for having one bad year because Florida doesn't know who they are. He never should have been fired from Florida. That was a disastrous mistake. Dan Mullen has UNLV sitting at 6-1. They're a real contender in the Mountain West. They've got a very real chance at potentially being a Group of 5 candidate, although I don't actually necessarily see that with the way the USF has been going on. But potentially, if they get upset in the conference championship game, the Mountain West champion could backdoor their way in to being ranked and sneaking into the playoff as the 12 seed. But that is not necessarily a realistic option. But either way, they've got a very real path to double-digit wins in year 1 under Dan Mullen. I believe he can do a similar sort of thing in Oregon State, okay? I don't think he wants to go back to the SEC. I don't think he wants to go back to a high-expectation environment because, again, he got fired for no reason, okay? Oregon State is neither of those things. You can make the case they're entering a worse conference than the Mountain West, even though they have a lot of Mountain West teams there. All right, so yeah, not great for everybody else, but I think it'd be a great job for Dan Mullen to have. He would be the guy that I would be all over if I was Oregon State. And then James Franklin, I haven't particularly mentioned him so far, but he is maybe the biggest and best free agent currently available. Because, yes, it ended poorly. Yes, Penn State as a program has higher expectations than what he was able to pursue. But the reality of the situation is he's legitimately a top 20 coach in college football. Was he overrated? And Josh Pate says, just like, where is he rated? And the answer was he was rated on the fringe of being a top 10 coach, and he was not a top 10 coach, okay? But he is probably a top 20 coach. He's a really, really good coach. He ran a very efficient, very clean operation at Penn State. He knows how to recruit. He knows how to develop. And he would be somebody that I would be very, very interested in bringing out there to Oregon State. Last 3 guys, Brent Vaughn, the Montana State head coach, has turned Montana State into a very, very good FCS program. Jason Eck at New Mexico. I think it's a little bit too early for him, but I do believe in him as a head coach. And Jay Hill, the BYU defensive coordinator who we've talked about before, really like him as a head coaching candidate this cycle as well, assuming BYU doesn't make the playoffs, okay? Because it's very hard to get hired away when you're making the playoffs. And my number 1 candidate, I don't think this is shocking or controversial at all, really. But my number 1 job opening thus far in the coaching carousel is Virginia Tech. Like, Virginia Tech is, in some ways, a sleeping giant, okay? This is a massive school with a big, big alumni base that has the potential to have a genuinely elite NIL program if you can get somebody in there that knows what they're doing and can organize it. Okay? This is also someone or a program that has some name brand recognition. They do kind of have like a a certain coolness factor to them from especially kids of my generation where they're growing up watching football in the early 2000s, late 1990s, because they were kind of one of them cool ACC programs back when the ACC was kind of dominating college football with Florida State and Miami and all that kind of jazz. But to say this is a real good job, but maybe, and I wouldn't even say good, this is a great job to have potentially. Okay, this is a program that understands who they are. They've had some very long tenured coaches during their career. They're not somebody that has a whole lot of expectation in terms of national winning. They don't have a whole lot of that. They're not delusional in that sense. This is also a program, because of where they are in Virginia, but that's kind of close to Maryland, which is a major hotbed for recruiting and stuff. But also the state of Virginia is right now and in the next couple of years got a lot of talent in it, like a lot of talent in it. Okay, Savion Hyder, a 5-star running back committed to Michigan, plays in Virginia, I believe. There's a ton of guys in Virginia and the DMV that Virginia Tech could start being in play for, as if they end up becoming a sort of regional power. Plus all of that, when we get down to a football perspective, the ACC as a conference does not have a top dog right now. Okay, as long as Mario Cristobal is at Miami, they will be good, not great. Okay, just the reality of who Mario Cristobal is as a coach. He's James Franklin with a cooler last name. That's all Cristobal is. That's it. And I think Cristobal's a good coach. Like, I think James Franklin's a good coach. But Virginia Tech has the opportunity. They are one of the very, very few teams in college football and programs in college football that have the opportunity to very, very quickly turn it around and become a real contender within their conference with one good recruiting class in the transfer portal and a couple of pretty good high school recruiting classes. In 3 years, Virginia Tech could be a national championship contender. For real. This is a program that has that ceiling in it, okay? Because Virginia Tech is a bigger brand than Virginia in Virginia. It just is. And so you are kind of the top dog in your state. You're in a conference that is right now wide open. There are a lot of good coaches in the ACC. Jeff Brom at Louisville, Fran Brown at Syracuse, Mario Cristobal, okay, whoever the fuck Florida State is going to hire after they fire whatever his name is. This is a program that has the ability to compete with all of them, which right now has the best blend of you're in a Power 4 conference, you don't have crazy expectations, you can compete with the top dogs, and you're a sleeping giant in college football, kind of. So Virginia Tech is a perfect blend of what I would be looking for in a head coaching opportunity if I was, a candidate to be a head coach at places, okay? As far as my candidates go here, again, these are all guys that we've kind of talked about before. These top 4 guys, I would be ecstatic for Virginia Tech if they got them. Eric Morris at North Texas, offensive genius, okay? If you have a very good play caller as your head coach, that is the best spot to be in football at any level. If your play caller, who is an elite play caller, is your head coach, you have the best opportunity in existence. It's just the reality of the situation here, which is my next 2 guys as well. Brian Hartline, the Ohio State offensive coordinator, and Will Stein, the Oregon offensive coordinator, are also exactly that. Okay, so Brian Hartline is somebody who I know is going to be able to bring the juice on the recruiting trail. Will Stein, I'm not so sure, which is why I have him below Brian Hartline. Brian Hartline is below Eric Morris because Brian Hartline, even though I think he clears everybody in this conversation from a recruiting perspective, Eric Morris is a genuine, like, mastermind play caller. And Brian Hartline has had one really good and really efficient year calling plays, but we don't really know if he's going to be consistent, what he's going to look like without all that wide receiver talent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I do believe in him. And I also believe that he's going to bring, like, a lot of confidence and a lot of, like, swagger to a program, and that meshes very, very well with the kind of brand that Virginia Tech is. That is a big time appeal for me when I'm thinking of fits for this school. Will Stein, again, very, very good offensive coordinator. I just wonder if he'd be able to hit that peak. Well, I don't particularly know if he's great at recruiting. Now, Oregon as a program is fantastic at recruiting. They're putting up Alabama and Clemson numbers from the days back in the days. They're doing great on the recruiting trail. James Franklin, I think, would also be a fit because if you put him in the ACC, I think he'd do a very, very good job there. And then finally, John Summerall, who I like, but I kind of feel like John Summerall should just stay at Tulane. I feel like he's going to be a hot name in this coaching cycle, and I don't feel all that comfortable with him moving on from Tulane and being all that successful. Very well could be wrong, but he'd kind of be the emergency candidate for me for this team here. Second to last thing I'm going to do here in this video is I'm going to talk about really quickly some potential openings. Okay, there are 10 schools that I think have the potential of being open at the end of the cycle. Okay, these 5: Wisconsin, Auburn, Florida State, LSU, and Michigan State. I am of the opinion that they either are almost certainly going to open up or they should be open. Okay, now the second 5, I think you can make the argument that they should move on from their current coaches, but I don't think they will. All right, and we'll get to that second 5 here in a minute. But as far as these guys go here, Wisconsin is a program that does not understand who they are. Okay, Luke Fickell was a home run hire for them. Now, I thought that was a disastrous decision for Luke Fickell to leave Cincinnati to go to a place with less pull regionally, with less of a brand nationally. Like, Cincinnati is like a very consistent, very good program. And Wisconsin may be in the Big Ten, but they're not a very strong brand in the Big Ten. They're one of the weakest, in fact. And I thought that was a disaster for James Franklin, but I thought it was an excellent hire for Wisconsin. And it turned out to be bad for both of them. Auburn, as far as Auburn goes, this could be a very interesting job, but again, just like Wisconsin, just like a lot of teams we've talked about today, they don't understand who they are, okay? They are never going to be a program that consistently competes for national titles, period. End of discussion. They are a building program, okay? So you're going to have a year where you go 7-5, 8-4, and then that next year you could go 9-3, 10-2, maybe backdoor your way into the playoffs potentially, and then in that third year you're going to be real contenders in the SEC, and then after that year you might have another good year, and then you start over, and you go back to the first year where you're 7-5, 8-4. That's what Auburn is. That's what they were under Gus Malzahn, and they fired him because they thought they should be competing for national titles every year, despite Gus Malzahn being the only coach that could have consistently challenged Nick Saban and beat him more than any other coach. Okay, and the reason I'm talking about Wisconsin and Auburn together is because way more than any other jobs here, this has been a disaster. Okay, flat out and straight up. Disastrous hires. Hugh Freeze had one very good year at Liberty. Liberty's had good years since him. Okay, Liberty, it turns out, is just a very good program. Hugh Freeze probably isn't a great football coach. Wisconsin, they said, hey, Luke Fickell built something special at Cincinnati. Why can't he do that here? Well, A, you're in a much tougher conference. You're in a conference where you will never be a top 8 brand, where you will never have the amount of NIL money that even Cincinnati probably has. So even though you are the top dog in your state, who the fuck is coming out of Wisconsin? Like, nobody. Okay, like, it used to be Wisconsin offensive linemen were like such a big deal. That's not the case anymore. Nobody gives a shit about that. All right, because they're not developing offensive linemen like that anymore. And Auburn, you look at Auburn, that was a cool place for defensive players. A lot of really good defensive players in the NFL went to Auburn. That's not the case anymore. I mean, their defense is still good, but they're not all that anymore. These are two programs that need to understand who they are, and they need to get a coach that's going to bring consistency and professionalism rather than taking a swing at somebody that's going to magically Kurt Signetti them into a national powerhouse overnight. All right? Florida State is the next coach. I think they're going to fire whoever, what's his name? I can't remember his name. I think he's gone. And unlike everybody else, their next coach is already like written in stone. It's chiseled in stone. I was going to say written on the sand. It's not written on the sand because that's too impermanent. It's chiseled into stone. Deion Sanders will be the next head coach of Florida State. He's had enough success at Colorado where you can say to him, oh yeah, if he comes to Florida State and he recruits like he's been recruiting at Colorado for some ungodly reason, and all of a sudden now you're going to Florida, which is in or Florida State, which is in Tallahassee, Florida, and all of a sudden you got recruiting base that you can keep kids home, and you're able to recruit the state of Florida and southern kids that'll be able to drive back to Georgia or to Alabama or somewhere and be able to Louisiana, et cetera, and be able to see their family fairly regularly, where it's not the end of the world if they go up north or out west or something and their family can't come to any games. Yeah, that's a big deal. Florida State could absolutely turn it around very quickly. And I think Deion Sanders would be a very compelling hire for them. And, like, I don't know if I'm the only person that thinks this, but, like, it is so obvious to me that Deion Sanders is the next head coach of Florida State. Like, I might be crazy, but I think it is absurdly obvious that that's what's going to happen, okay? LSU is the team that I am most questionable about in terms of if they're going to fire their head coach or not, okay? LSU is legitimately a very, very big brand. It's not a top 3 brand in the SEC, unfortunately. Okay, number 1's Georgia, number 2's Texas, number 3's Alabama. Okay, but you can make a very, very strong and compelling case that LSU is the exception to that 3-team rule that I have because of how historically successful they've been. Okay, their previous 3 head coaches all had won a national championship at LSU. And by the way, I think Brian Kelly's a great head coach, okay? You don't do what he's done throughout his career without being a great head coach, okay? But it's a very strange culture fit at LSU. He just hasn't been able to run a clean program. They've had the offenses, and then the defense is horrendous. And then now they have the defense, and the offense is horrendous. So, yeah, it's really tough to justify keeping Brian Kelly on a merit-based sort of thing, okay? But his buyout is crazy expensive, and that might be enough to save his job if he can pull off an upset or two to end the year against Texas A&M, which I don't particularly think is likely, or against Oklahoma or somebody else, okay? If he can do that, he might be able to, wiggle his way into keeping his job for another year simply so that they can negotiate in the offseason to lower his buyout. Florida State. Jonathan Smith also does have a relatively large buyout, but this program has nothing going well for it. They have nothing. Jonathan Smith has been unable to develop players. He has been unable to recruit at all in either the transfer portal or at the high school level. It's just been a disaster of a program right now under Jonathan Smith. I think you've got to fire Jonathan Smith potentially this week. If you get blown out by Michigan, you could see Michigan State move on from Jonathan Smith. So these are the 5 job openings that I'm not particularly confident are going to be opened, even though I think it probably would be time to move on. Kansas State, it's not particularly anything that this program has or hasn't done. It's just like Colin Klein is right there, right? Like, he's the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M. He's doing a fantastic job for them. Like, he should just be the guy, right? Like, he was arguably the best player in the history of Kansas State. Okay, at least while I've been alive. Okay? Like that would be a Cinderella type situation that would motivate the fan base, that would motivate boosters and potential like big wig money guys. This would be outstanding hire for them. Okay, I don't know if they move on or not, but they have been kind of disappointing this year. South Carolina is the next one. Shane Beamer. I actually don't think they should move on, but I think there's a possibility they do. If they do, it would be signaling to me that South Carolina does not understand who they are. They are not going to be a program that's going to consistently compete for SEC titles or for the playoffs. Okay, they should have made the playoffs last year because they beat LSU and the rest fucking took it away from them, but that's irrelevant. This is, I think, a program that's just going to have wild ups and downs. And Shane Beamer's done a fantastic job recruiting. He's done a very good job developing. But, like, there's just not enough there right now for them to win or compete consistently in the SEC. Mark Stoops over at Kentucky. He's been very consistent at Kentucky. They've always kind of been good, never great. But he's been bad the past couple of years, so I do think his seat is getting pretty hot. Dabo Swinney at Clemson, I think it's time to move on. I think it's very obvious that in this NIL era, in the transfer portal era, he cannot compete. He flat out and straight up does not have the ability to compete with other teams like that. He just doesn't. Now, Clemson still has a ton of talent. They still do very well in the high school ranks. That's not enough in college football nowadays. It's just not. Clemson, as a university, does have the potential to have a quality NIL program, not anything crazy, but they do have the ability to be better than what they have right now. But it's going to take moving on from the best coach in the history of Clemson in Dabo Swinney. Boston College, I mean, they're just awful. They're just so bad that you've got to start thinking about firing coach. And Bill O'Brien was kind of a weird hire to me anyway, because he's never been successful as a head coach at any level. He was bad in the NFL. He was bad at Penn State. I mean, he wasn't bad at Houston, but he was never good either. He was James Franklin of the NFL at Houston, where they'd all make the playoffs, but then they'd always lose in the first round. I don't know. But those are the other potential openings, the ones that I'm leaning towards probably not opening, at least in my opinion. Finally, the last thing I'm going to do here is really quickly, I'm going to go over some of my favorite fits and favorite hires for these things. These would be a lot of very, very interesting positions if it all happened, and I tried to avoid putting the same coach down for a different job, okay? If it's not on this list, it's because I didn't particularly have strong feelings, or these are just the first ones I thought of, okay? Number one, I talked about it at length during the Oregon State section, okay? Dan Mullen to Oregon State, I think, would be a brilliant fit for both sides. I think he could do very, very, very good things at Oregon State. But my absolute favorite fit in the entire whole ass thing is Brian Hartline going to Virginia Tech. That seems like such a culture fit to me. I think he would be brilliant with that program. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Michigan fan and I want his ass to stop recruiting wide receivers to Ohio State. I swear that's not why I'm doing this. I genuinely think he's one of the best head coaching candidates in all of college football this year. The problem is he's probably not going to go anywhere because if you hire him, it would have to be after the transfer portal window has closed. And that is disaster for a college football program, and just not something that's going to work out very well. But still, that's such a culture fit. I would love it if he ended up at Virginia Tech. I think it'd be a home run for both sides. Brent Vigen to Colorado State. Again, similar area. Really, really, really like that fit. Tony Annese, who's done a fantastic job at Ferris State, winning national title after national title. I think he's earned an opportunity at the lower levels of college football. I think he could have a Brian Kelly at Central Michigan type of career. Clark Leah to Penn State, I think would be a great fit as well. Eric Morris to Oklahoma State, I think would be fantastic for them. That's definitely my favorite fit for Eric Morris. Deion Sanders to Florida State, again, I just feel like that's going to happen. I think that would motivate the fan base. You would get boosters. Deion Sanders would be a major recruiting buff for people in the state of Florida. This would be a fantastic hire for Florida State. And then Colin Klein, the same kind of thing with Kansas State. I think it'd be very, very motivating for the fan base and the potential boosters, and do a lot of good things for the NIL situation there. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And it's at this point I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. But now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.